I'm still Duncan McLeod.
And I'm still Regardt van Berg.
This is TalkCentral episode 262 for the week starting 9 June 2019.
TalkCentral is brought to you by TechCentral. Join our YouTube stream live at Sundays at 1 p.m. and hit that subscribe button.
On TalkCentral this week, all the latest on the Huawei situation.
Also on the show this week, the Great Bank Branch Massacre.
And we, of course, recap Apple's big developer keynote, and there's a lot to talk about there.
Some good stuff and some really weird stuff, right?
Some very expensive stuff.
Some very expensive, yeah, we'll get to that. It's Sunday afternoon, we're live streaming on YouTube, and it's time to talk everything tech.
Well, how's it, Regardt?
How's it, Duncan?
Very good, thanks. We are not quite starting at 1 p.m. today because we spent the last hour doing quite extensive fiddling. We are coming to you for the first time in Telestream's Wirecast live streaming software. And I must say, it has not been the easiest process.
If it was that easy, everybody would be doing it, clearly.
Yeah. We've had some serious audio issues, and eventually we resolved them, not through software, but by pressing a button, which we're still not quite sure what it does, on my mixing desk here.
I think you just switched it off, Duncan. That's basically it.
Yeah, I don't know.
That setting, whatever that feature is.
Yeah. One of my favorite artists is Bruce Dickinson. He's the lead singer of the rock band Iron Maiden, and he's just written a book called "What Does This Button Do?" He's a pilot, and he just randomly presses buttons to see what they do.
I hope it's not while he's flying his plane. Imagine.
Indeed. But that's eventually how we managed to fix this, by randomly pressing buttons on the mixing desk, and the echo issue went away. Now, I don't know if that is actually what we were supposed to do, but it's resolved it for the moment. Whether it's a kludge or a permanent solution, I'm not sure. But yeah, we're on YouTube, and we are broadcasting in Wirecast. You'll notice we're both sitting on top of monitors in our live stream, playing around a bit with some graphics in Photoshop. I think it looks pretty cool. But
I want to be in a spaceship, Duncan. I want a spaceship, Starship Enterprise backing, please.
Well, I've got the planet Earth behind me on my green screen. The idea is to mix this all up. Regardt, you'll eventually have a green screen too, and we can...
For now, it's I don't need CGI, Duncan. This is real world stuff that I've got.
The real world behind you.
No computer can generate that.
But that's good fun, although hellishly complicated to get this stuff to work properly. But millions of others have done it, so we will get there, and we have got there. This is, however, I'd call this version 0.1 alpha release of this newfangled podcast. But we're going to be doing amazing stuff with this, especially with this Elgato Stream Deck, which I mentioned in our last podcast. Press buttons here, and videos will pop up, and Regardt can go larger than life on the screen, and then I can pop in, and
now we're talking.
And we can do lower third captions and all sorts of stuff. So this is very much our first attempt at this, and I'm reasonably impressed with it. With all the audio issues that we've been having, I hope the audio stream is going out okay onto YouTube. We're not broadcasting the fact that we are doing this live today, not on social media anyway, because the chances of things going wrong are significant during the course of the next 45 to 60 minutes that we do this podcast. But let's hope that it's all good. We are recording the audio version of this as well, although that is showing some interesting potential problems in the audio recording software. So worst case scenario, we might have to strip the audio for the audio version of this podcast out of YouTube. So if that's happened, you'll know why our audio quality perhaps isn't quite what it normally is in our audio version of the podcast. But it's pretty cool, Regardt. We're going to get there. We're going to make this the best damn tech podcast in the world.
Oh, we got here pretty quick. I mean, we're doing video double up screen. 6 months after we started looking into this seriously. I think it's been going pretty well. Actually, less time. Earlier this year. Yeah. About 6 months, right?
I must say, I did give up on OBS Studio. It was just too complicated to use. I probably would have got there eventually, but it probably would have taken another 6 months. But quite like Wirecast. It's good software. Pretty easy to use. It's not the cheapest though. But I can do all sorts of very cool things, like pressing buttons like this. I'm going to actually attempt something live here.
The demo.
Risk breaking something, but there we go. We're now plastered on a brick wall. I can do all sorts of other weird and cool things like have a TV
Oh,
studio.
just another brick on the wall, Duncan.
Just another 2 bricks on the wall, yeah. But there you go. We've got a live. It's like we're in a live television studio now.
Can I look around? Can I see anything? Because I don't see anything.
You can't see it, no. All right, let's go back to. Oops, I've got to keep remembering to hit the right buttons, otherwise it doesn't go live on there. There we go. There's the bank of monitors behind us. It's as if we're in the DSTV control room in Randburg. And let's go back to our broadcast for the day.
Can you have the cricket up or something on the background? A live sporting event.
I think we might get sued if we do that, but in theory, yes, we could.
Get some takedown notices from YouTube.
Yeah, I'm sure you can pull live video off YouTube and put it straight in here. But yeah, you've got to be quite careful with the copyright issues around this stuff and what images you use and all the rest of it.
Well,
but it's good fun.
Down on that very much.
But it's good fun. If you listen to the audio-only version of this podcast, do head on over to YouTube because we are going to be having a lot of fun with our YouTube channel in the coming weeks and months. This is very much, as I said, version 0.1, and we're going to be making big improvements. Search TalkCentral, one word, in YouTube, and look for the TC icon with the light blue background, which will be changing soon because Regardt hates it.
That's a different debate. Hate is a strong word.
Okay. I also agree it's not the best, so there may be some changes there. But look for the TC letters, search TalkCentral, one word, and hit that subscribe button. And if you see a bell button, hit that too, because then you'll get alerted whenever we go live on air. And our subscriber numbers, by the way, Regardt, have been growing very nicely in the last couple of weeks.
Nice.
Very, very happy with the growth. So thanks for tuning into the show and to the TalkCentral podcasts more generally. We'll probably be continuing doing those in Google Hangouts on air just for the moment while we bed down this software. I don't think I want to have to get the CEO of a major company on a call and have to spend an hour with him trying to troubleshoot audio issues. But once everything's bedded down, we'll have a nice template, and we'll be doing it all in Wirecast and using the Wirecast Rendezvous software, which is what we're using to chat to each other today. You could also use Skype to do this using a technology called NDI, but we haven't quite got that one right yet.
Well, that's an OBS-related issue, right? The OBS-related issue.
That is, well, we had the same problem in Wirecast. So it's an NDI issue, and I need to do some more research on it. But Rendezvous seems to work pretty well. I don't think we need to use Skype, and we don't get the little Skype watermark embedded on the screen, which they insist on. There's no watermarks at all, in fact, in these two videos that we're streaming today. But let me go back to my show notes, because we need to talk about the week's tech news, don't we? And we need to do our quiz.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The elusive quiz. The poor thing. You forget it every week.
Do you want to kick it off?
Certainly. The first question. Apple this week debuted a new cheese grater Mac Pro. What is the starting price? One of the new 6K monitors designed to go with the new Mac Pro cost. And it's a pretty hefty price.
It is, yeah. And Regardt, you broke up a little bit there. The second part of that question is what is the starting price? And for a bonus point, how much does one of the new 6K monitors designed to go with the new Mac Pro cost? And the second question, how many bank branches is Standard Bank closing down, it said this week?
Third question, on what basis is Google seeking an exemption from the US government for dealing with Android?
And Google is making its biggest acquisition since 2014. Which company is it buying? For $2.6 billion.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big one. And final question. Samsung has revealed it'll use which company's graphics chips in its future smartphones? Another interesting development, I think.
A very interesting development, and it just shows you how gaming is starting to really take off on mobile. Can you imagine how, with the advances in silicon chip development, just how powerful smartphones are going to be 10 years from now?
Wow. I mean, if you really look at it, how powerful they are now, what we can do with them, it still blows my mind.
Yeah. But imagine your smartphone, you plug that into, Samsung smartphone into that, what do they call it, DeX, Samsung DeX, to turn it into a PC, and then playing, I don't know, Crysis-style graphics or better on your mobile phone on a monitor. It's going to come.
And look, Apple has certainly seen this, and that's why they've thrown those games on their Apple TV and within the operating system now. I mean, that is going to be a huge thing, and they have to compete.
And Google's doing it too with Stadia.
Yeah. Very interesting development. Also, well worth debating though, because a lot of people are still going to be loving their PCs. this is going to certainly appeal to a newer generation, and this is very forward-thinking stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's, I thought we'd start with chatting about Huawei, but actually let's start with Apple, because it really was the big news of the week. You watched the keynote, Regardt? Oh, Regardt, I've lost your audio. Regardt, I have lost your audio. Oh, strange. I'm not sure if it's on your side, Regardt, but let me start by chatting a little bit about the. Let me start talking about the developer conference while you press some buttons there. So yeah, I think the big announcement was left to the end, and that was the launch of the new Mac Pro, $6,000 machine, and Regardt's dropped out of the call. Regardt, you're back. Oh, okay. The challenge of doing a live podcast. That's why we didn't put this one out on social media this morning. But I'm glad you're back. Yeah, I was trying to ad lib there and not doing very well at it, but we'll cut this out of the audio version of the podcast. But we were just starting to talk about the Apple keynote, and I was saying that the main event was for me, was the launch of the new Mac Pro. Yeah. Back to the design of the cheese grater, which was so popular. I remember using a Mac in a publishing company back in the 90s, and there was just those cheese graters everywhere. And they were lovely, lovely machines. And you'd press that button on the top and it'd go boom, switch on. Compared to today's machines, I mean, obviously they're not powerful at all, but at the time they were wonderful. And it's great to see Apple. Sorry, Regardt? And I was just saying, it's great to see Apple going back to that design. I think it was they've admitted, and they've taken on board all the criticism about that garbage can, the trash can Mac Pro, which was not upgradable, was just Apple showing off that it could do fancy, pretty-looking designs. But it wasn't what the world wanted. It wasn't what people wanted. They wanted Mac Pros that are upgradable, and you can get into them and put new cards in them and do all sorts of stuff like that. So well done to them for going back to that design. Yeah.
I do like this machine. I think it's fantastic. It's addressing a very niche market. Again, there's a big gap. This thing is 60, 70 odd thousand rand, right? What happens to the guys that wants to spend 20, 30 and wants a machine of, I mean, yes, they will have to go for a notebook, but they're not getting that PC experience that they were kind of asking for still.
Yes.
So, I guess we can always have something to criticize about whenever something gets launched. But I would like to see that, it's again, it's no use in just making, Apple is known for making things hellishly expensive. But this isn't going to filter down into your mainstream user in any time soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a powerhouse machine. And if animators on board it, great. But again, most of the studios who use this type of tech, again, will probably buy a bunch of Windows machines for more of their animators or their designers. This is going to be a showpiece like any high-end Mac is. Are we rendering, or we using the new MacBook, the new Mac Pros? It's a showpiece.
Now, Apple claimed that the pricing isn't out of kilter, claiming that similarly spec'd Windows workstation PCs can cost up from $8,000 and upwards, and they're coming in at $6,000. I have my doubts about that, and I'd like to see it interrogated. But certainly they're putting beautiful hardware inside that thing. Intel Xeon up to a 28 core.
Beautiful.
If you look at it, though, the base spec, the $6,000 base spec, is an Intel Xeon 8-core processor. I forget how much storage is in that base version, but it's very much the base spec. Can you imagine how much this thing is?
512 gigabyte, I think, isn't it?
512 gigabyte SSD.
Yeah,
that's not much for the price you're paying. But you can spec it up. It's almost endlessly configurable. So you can go to that 28 core Intel Xeon processor, you can add up to 1.5 terabytes of RAM. And presumably almost infinite amount of storage, how much, depending on how much you want to spend. But if the base spec is $6,000, how much are you going to pay for that beast once it's specced out with like 512 gigabytes of RAM and a 4 terabyte SSD or multiple SSDs? It's not going to be cheap.
What's the workstation you get for the designer or the graphic artist who's got it all, Duncan? This is clearly it, right? So you reward your best employees with a very expensive machine.
Yeah.
Again, in the real world, and I love this machine, and I'm not taking anything away from Apple
beautiful.
in this regard. It's a fantastic piece of equipment in line with what Apple is known for doing. But again, most people that would use a machine of that caliber, okay, firstly, would they be using an Apple operating system for most of their software? Because a lot of the software that does some of the science stuff, I don't know, I would argue probably works better on Windows-based machines. Apple is very good at optimizing their own hardware. But if you're looking at the software that runs on these devices, potentially. But again, smaller studios or the studios that really want power, maybe this isn't for them. But you're gonna reach a lot more if you give something to an audience that's makes it a little bit more affordable in that sense. And also, let's be real, a lot of people that use that want to use a machine spec like this, they'd probably get away with using slightly cheaper hardware to achieve a very similar result, like using gaming grade graphics cards and just really fast Intel CPUs.
Yeah.
And we're living in there's always a gray area when you can build your own machine on a Windows-based platform.
Yeah.
The benefit here obviously is a closed ecosystem, so they can control the power that gets used. I mean, Adobe is a good example of how on Windows machines, you don't get it's not really optimized to use all the cores on your processor. So often when you're rendering video, you're using one core. Adobe did say they're going to update that, but within this environment, Apple can make sure that this is going to be the fastest machine for that purpose. And arguing that, now it's becoming a valuable piece of equipment if time is everything in your production house.
Yeah, I guess so. And I mean, if your business is making movies or television or content and that sort of thing, then maybe there's justification that you can invest money in this. In fact, I was interested to see during the developer keynote presentation that I think it was Craig Federighi who said you can actually rack mount these things.
Wow!
So imagine rack mounting like 10 of these things in a server room, and guys are going to do that for doing very heavy video editing, 4K video editing, special effects, programming, all that sort of stuff. I mean,
is this really a server farm? Do you really want to put this beautiful piece of equipment in a rack somewhere?
Yeah. It kind of feels like it needs to be on show, right?
Oh yes, I still have my hesitation about those industrial-looking handles. I mean, it's beautiful and very functional, but I was almost expecting something a little smoother with that beautiful front. Maybe a smoother handle. Although I need to see one in person still.
I like the wheels.
I think
the optional.
Oh yeah, the wheels are beautiful. Oh, how much are they? Like probably $2,000.
They haven't said.
No, we'll get to the stand gate now.
We will.
But I think the first, probably my overall concern with a machine like this, and again coming back to the Windows based machines that you can buy parts for, is the repair, warranty, upgrade, all those kind of costs. It's not the kind of thing you can rip out the parts and just fix yourself, as you can do with virtually every other Windows machine.
Yeah.
You're probably going to want to, or you're going to have to send it to Apple to get stuff done if it's within warranty, right? They're not going to let you fiddle in there and do stuff. You probably wouldn't want to at that price either, but that's a catch-22, right? If they make it cheaper and let people fiddle with their own hardware. But we know the ecosystem, so we can't really fault Apple for that. Yeah. But people that are in a server environment, it's they would want to fix things themselves just to get things up and running. Relying on Apple's server support or support for something like this could also just be a hindrance. Probably not if you're an A-grade client and you have 10 of these machines. They will look after you, right?
Yeah. It's beautiful, but it's so expensive. But let's talk about StandGate, as you described it. So they also launched this beautiful, how big was it? 32 inches.
Yeah, 32-inch.
Beautiful LCD. 6K screen with the same sort of cheese grater design on the back, which is used for cooling.
Dust magnet. You say dust magnet.
Yes. But stunning looking machine, or stunning looking monitor, and it looks just absolutely beautiful next to, I mean, it's Apple industrial design par excellence. But $5,000 for the monitor, And if you want to stand with your monitor, thank you very much. It'll be another $1,000 or 15,000 Rand before taxes.
Yeah, I couldn't understand why they would. I mean, again, it's like Apple is trying to rip people. Now let's see how much money we can take from our top end clients, and this is exactly it. It's
yeah.
I don't know how you would justify $1,000 stand. I mean, they should have just sold it as one price, as one set of price. Why would you have a very expensive stand separately? Would everybody mount there on a Visa stand? Probably. Those are probably more versatile too. The stands that you can kind of move around your desk.
I'm sure third-party stand manufacturers are salivating over this because they're looking at this and saying, "Hey, but we can do this at a very good profit margin for $500 or less."
I mean, we know that brushed metal look of Apple has been replicated very easily.
Yes.
I don't know. They like to make news, Apple.
Yeah.
They're kind of moving further away from. So we definitely will like a lot of the things we're seeing, but they're moving further into their own closed walled garden. I mean, every time you buy into something, you are locked into it. So if you buy that screen, you're going to want to buy that stand.
Yes.
Because it's just kind of $1,000 extra.
Yeah, I just chuck it in the basket. Yeah.
Write it off as a tax expense or something.
Yeah. So, but if you're buying the monitor and the computer and the stand, the base computer, I must emphasize, with nothing added to it, you're paying $12,000. That's 180,000 Rand if I think my maths is wrong. It's about my maths is terrible. This is why I'm a journalist, not a engineer.
Don't sell a Bitcoin, Duncan.
It's about 150K if my sort of top of them. It's about 150K before tax, so maybe 180K after import duties and everything else. Just for a computer. That's the price of a small car.
And I would certainly argue that you can get a Windows equivalent for a lot cheaper than that.
I'd imagine
so. A lot of the Apple stuff you are paying. I mean, $1,000 stand, you're already cutting out 10 grand there. 15 grand.
15 grand.
Just get a really nice Dell monitor, Alienware monitor, or something like that, 2 or 3 of those if you want, plus a fancy 4-up stand.
Yeah.
Look, we know Apple is very much driven by desirability, and people are very much still fans of the ecosystem. I mean, they aren't where they are for no reason.
Yeah.
But if we say this every time they announce something, they are kind of ripping people. We know they're making a lot of money, money in the bank money, so they're not really doing anybody favors. They're really not doing anybody any favors. They're just doing some cool stuff and saying, okay, this is the price, very expensive. If you can't get it, wait for a few years until we bring out a new version. These are going to go in the second market. They'll probably float around for a few more years, and they'll build a new generation of kind of Apple grater machines that will be adorning every creative corner office.
But it's definitely their strategy, and it's Tim Cook's strategy to push the boundary on pricing. And I wonder if that is going to backfire on them when the economy turns downward. And I'm not, of course, referring to the South African economy, which is in a mess. I'm talking about the American economy and some of the other economies around the world. There's been enormous wealth creation in the US in the last 10 years since the so-called Great Recession. The stock market is soaring. Companies are doing very well. Profitability is at record levels. So companies have the cash to spend. What happens when there's an inevitable downturn and the US goes into a recession, which is not out of the question in the near term, given what's going on with Trump and China?
That's certainly going to make things more expensive too. So even even the stuff that the American manufacturers use to build, a lot of those parts coming from China. If this tariff war is going to happen, tit for tat mentality is going to come into play, and things are going to get more expensive.
Yeah.
So Apple is going to push up their price, and that's outside of currency fluctuations and general, people don't have money to spend. In South Africa, certainly, I don't see many people buying into this. No. You'll see a few first. People are going to brag about it on Instagram. Look at my Mac, my Mac Pro.
Yeah.
But even with the dustbin, with the little black round one, you didn't see that many.
No.
Regretful purchases all around.
Yeah, I think you'll see it. Certainly in big video production houses, companies that supply video content into MultiChoice, for example, will probably invest in one or two of these things, but the market's not going to be big, and very few people are going to be buying this as their home computer. But that's not what it's aimed at.
Even those guys, what are they upgrading from? A lot of them, they would be using MacBooks, right? Or
iMacs.
Or iMacs, but again, that you're jumping 10 levels here with the power and performance of this
Yeah.
machine.
Yeah.
So those people have got Windows-based servers already running in the background. Their render farms are probably rented out if they are kind of in that intermediary level of requiring this power before buying it. It doesn't make practical sense. I mean, unless we are wrong and the PC equivalent is the same price, which I kind of doubt.
I doubt it. But those
It's a
Intel
very
Xeon,
interesting.
those Intel Xeon processors are very, very expensive. I can't remember what it was, but I was looking at that 28-core Intel Xeon processor, and it was significant amount of money.
But remember, you can go to your local distributor. You have a guy that supplies your hardware. He can buy a dealer price on Intel hardware. You can't do it with Apple. So if you need to buy anything new for your machine, you're going to have to go to Apple. I don't know. Would you be able to buy these CPUs off? Okay, again, would you be able to upgrade your own machine if you want to? Probably not, unless you will void your warranty, which is fine.
I presume
you don't mind doing it.
You can certainly do those with the old cheese graters. What's interesting is NVIDIA support. Apple's very close to AMD, so this thing's got a high-end AMD graphics card in it. Little clarity at this stage whether NVIDIA is going to be providing its graphics cards or be supporting the Mac Pro. And I think a lot of people are going to want to put NVIDIA cards in these machines.
Oh, definitely. All right. Look, AMD isn't there yet in terms of their graphic performance. They've got some fantastic cards.
Yeah.
But NVIDIA is still the number one with regards to gaming and gaming performance. This does touch on the other part. I mean, not gaming so much as VR rendering or just having a powerhouse machine to output kind of graphics. NVIDIA is definitely the way to go. And those guys would want to mess with their own hardware again.
Yeah. So that's the Mac Pro, but there was plenty else announced. It was actually a very busy keynote. The other thing that stood out for me was the new iPadOS, which is basically iOS, but they've split it now. They've forked it, and it looks like the iPadOS is going to go in its own direction.
About time again.
I agree. And I'm quite excited about this release. I'm particularly excited about the ability that it now supports external drives. You can now plug your DSLR in and import your photos directly into Lightroom, which is stuff that should have been there with the launch of the iPad Pro the new iPad Pros last year, if not further back. But it looks good, and I like the ability it's going to have a tighter grid of icons. I always felt that when you were looking at the iPad, particularly on a bigger screened iPad, there was all this wasted space between the icons. And now you're going to have Android-style widgets by swiping to the left, and you don't have to swipe to a different page. And Android did it. Yeah, and lots of new hand gestures, which I think it's going to be worth time learning. Like copy and paste is a 3-fingered gesture now to copy and paste. I think it's It's pinch out to copy and then pinch into with 3 fingers to drop to paste. And lots of little details like that, making it easier to multitask and switch between applications. I think it's going to be a bit of a learning curve, actually, looking at all the different finger options you're going to have to learn with iPadOS. But it's going to make it's certainly not yet a desktop competitor, but it's going to take it a long way in being something that you can use on the road if your laptop's flat or you don't want to take your laptop with you. You can really start to use this as a basic PC.
Yeah, it is very long overdue, and I think developers will obviously now start developing their apps, to make use of all these features. It'll be great to see it. But again, old iPad users, you're gonna have to upgrade. That walled garden is closing in. So now all of a sudden, if you look at the last 10 years, if you had an Apple device within 5 years of launch, you were still current for the most part. You could get a lot of the features. There was nothing majorly outdated if you didn't get the latest update. But your apps would still work. Now we've got this 20-year cycle almost since those devices, 15 to 20-year cycle, since a lot of those devices have hit the market. We're now seeing, there's the desirability factor coming in where, I kind of need to upgrade. Do I want to go out or do I want to keep staying in the Apple walled garden? And for most people that I've spoken to, it's a difficult choice to leave if your life is on there.
Yeah. So dark mode is coming to iOS. Dark mode seems to be coming to everything these days, right?
I thought iOS had it already.
No, apparently not. No.
But Windows had it, Android had it.
Yeah, I use dark mode in Windows. It's very nice.
I've seen some reports that are interesting on a side note. There's some reports out there that say that reading light on dark may not be the best thing for your eyes after all, because the world around us is light on black. Everything is bright, and the dark bits, which is in the minority of things we see, is there just for the contrast. Just interesting, something worth thinking about, right?
Yeah, but my eyes certainly feel more relaxed though when I've got dark mode on my Windows desktop.
Well, especially at night, because if you are sitting and you have, and also our screens are much brighter, and if we look at it all day, it's a much brighter thing than what we should be looking at directly all day. So the benefits might be there. It might relieve it obviously a lot more, but it is changing the way we're seeing things, I think.
Yeah,
but I love dark mode.
Yeah. There's also, I think it's built into the operating system now, and I think it's built into Android too. There used to be an app, there still is an app called Flux, which reduces the, I don't know what they call it, it's a certain type of light that your monitor emits.
The blue light.
It's blue light, and it makes it much yellower. So after the sun sets, and you can actually control it through the software, but it can also check based on your location what time the sun sets, and then it can adjust the blue light output on your monitor or your phone. To help rest your eyes. And I used to use that before I went to dark mode, and it really did help, actually.
I still use it with dark mode because a lot of apps, or there is still a lot of white around the screen. We know it's a very bad habit to be checking your phone before bed and in the morning, regardless. We should kind of be getting away from that. But
not going to happen.
Not going to happen. It's a modern world. Yeah. But I often read as my yellow or as that mode switches, and I've actually just extended the time now on my settings to compensate for the kind of the later sunrise.
Yeah.
But you can actually feel the difference in the strain on your eyes. It's actually it's as soon as it switches to the blue, it feels odd. It feels wrong. Obviously,
it does.
Your eyes
I
are
agree.
compensating.
Yeah.
But especially in the darker sense, you can actually see what difference it makes in your brain. In terms of your brain is realizing this is a color that makes you more alert or keeps you awake because it's a daylight wavelength.
Yeah. Was there anything else at WWDC that grabbed your attention, Regardt?
Well, the TV stuff in terms of the gaming controls was pretty interesting. Now they're seeing, they're obviously seeing a market here. They're trying to get people to spend some money on the gaming side too, and keeping it in-house, so to speak. But the game controller support is interesting.
Yeah. So it supports Xbox and PlayStation controllers.
Yeah, so you can, which is great. So if you have some pretty decent titles on the machine or on the Apple TV, it's going to be a very good experience. Although hardcore gamers, new gamers coming to the platform, I can see it being a big hit for them. So they're capitalizing on that mobile market, really.
Yeah, and a feature of streaming games where you don't actually download the game and install it on your device. The Apple TV is potentially a very powerful Trojan horse in the lounge, especially if it supports Xbox and PlayStation controllers. If you've got a decent fiber connection, I don't know how fast you need to be, maybe 50 megabits a second, maybe faster, and you can play. In theory, I think you could play the latest, most advanced, graphically intense games if they're streamed over the internet.
No, you're right. Or do you think it'll support Google Stadia? Probably not, right?
No.
Or it should actually. No, it wouldn't.
No. No,
but no, you're right. We are certainly, as much as we, us geeks, advocate for, PCs on our desk that we like to keep and maintain and kind of have the power to play our games on. The future, certainly speaking of a world where all of those resources will be offsite, hosted offsite. We've been speaking about this since, I can remember starting as a journalist in the early 2000s when we were starting talking about offloading some of the power or doing some things that's not on your machine. And the browser is kind of perfect example for that.
Yeah.
You can do so much within a browser that you don't need hardware on your machine. And now with this gaming platform, we're living in an interesting world, which again, begs the question: more expensive hardware is just conditioning us to get used to spending more for less. Maybe. Although we don't need the power, they need to fund those servers in the back end somewhere, right?
Yeah. But it's certainly true that there is a massive disruption coming to the video game industry in the next few years.
Yeah, it's going to be a very close one to watch, and it's nice to see gaming growing. But with anything that there's that there's a lot of excitement and intrigue about. We're going to have a lot of players that fall by the wayside, and a lot of things are going to go wrong. I mean, microtransactions in games is the biggest threat to games because, just a way for game developers or the not so good game developers in that sense to exploit people for more money. It's not on. I mean, I'm all for value added content in games. I know people want to buy and get clothes for their characters, but you need to be transparent with that. So we're gonna see some interesting things in games in the next few years from that point of view. And gaming is certainly mainstream. Everybody's gaming now, whether you physically playing Mario Brothers on your phone or collecting points at checkers to do those things. Everything is a game. Everything is gamified. Just depends on the level of graphics. Sorry, on that note, it was the Minecraft stuff is pretty interesting too, that you've seen on the iPad.
No, I missed that. What are they doing?
Well, the AR Minecraft that you can play with your iPad on a tabletop. So
I did see that.
You saw with Minecraft that you can and then with the new I forget the name, but where you can actually point your camera at somebody and they will map your movement. So that within gaming too, whatever you do, your personality is now digital in a digital world. We're all taking a step closer to that VR world where we physically immersed in it. Everything we know is in there.
And Apple is rumored still to be working on its VR glasses, VR headset. That could be a game changer when it comes out.
I think so. Especially if their trend of looking at what's the best out there and kind of
copying it,
copying it, making a call on one format. But having said that, again, your traditional gamer, if we're looking at the cost of hardware, the guys that you want to capture in terms of the gaming isn't the guys that would always have the most money. So if you want to introduce VR, those guys are going to go for the cheaper solutions first. I mean, yes, you are talking about Apple who's addressing a niche, but you can only stretch those two so far. The guys with little money to spend on their pastimes, they'll always have lots of choice.
Yeah.
The guys with lots of money, if they have choice too, but there are not that many of them to support a massive industry like that if you've got a very exclusive product. HoloLens all the way, I think.
So that was WWDC 2019. I thought it was one of the best keynotes in ages, actually, that Apple's done.
Yeah, it was good. I didn't really have any complaints, except for that stand, the price of that stand, the gasps in the audience.
The gasps, yeah. And the stand costs the same as an iPhone, right?
Yeah, that's the crazy part. I should just give an iPhone away with each stand. That'll be great.
So next Apple keynote is likely to be the iPhone in September, I think. I think that's the next one.
Yeah, have you seen some of those leaks with those 4-camera clusters?
I have.
It's interesting. I wouldn't mind that look. It doesn't look nice, but I mean, if the camera is good, right.
The ones I saw was kind of looked like the Huawei Mate 20 Pro, but kind of turned 45 degrees, with 3 camera buttons and a flash, or 3 cameras and a flash rather.
I didn't see that.
It really did look like the Apple Mate 20 Pro.
The Apple Mate 20 Pro. Is Apple copying other people? Going both of them. Is that why Trump is so angry at Huawei?
Well, Huawei
maybe at an internal meeting.
Huawei used to copy Apple. Now Apple copies Huawei, right?
I think everybody's copying everybody. No ideas original.
Speaking of Huawei, segue nicely into that discussion. Not a huge amount that's new on that, but we have seen that Facebook has told Huawei they may no longer pre-install Facebook, WhatsApp, and all the other Facebook-owned apps on Huawei devices. Not that it actually really matters, because you as the end user can download it from the Play Store.
Yeah, look, if you can't get access to the Play Store, that's a bigger problem.
Well, that's a problem for down the line, not right now.
not right now. Google also had a conversation, or Google also said that they are worried about this, in that there's going to be a huge security risk for everybody. If malware does start spreading on devices, even those that weren't patched to the latest operating system, like any Samsung devices, I mean, there will be a bigger threat for everybody if there's no support for this.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're still living in interesting times. My phone has started acting a bit weird from time to time. I don't know if yours has been doing interesting. No, it just at times it just feels a little bit clumsy. Like I don't know what it.
That's Android. It does that after a while. Just have to reset to factory settings and start again.
Maybe. So Google should be doing the job better so that we can.
It's not as bad as it used to be, but I remember in the old days of Android, I'd reset to factory settings once a quarter because the thing just became so slow and unusable.
Yeah, I should actually. I mean, I do have a lot of stuff running on there, but again, still a solidly performing device and one of the best cameras I've ever used.
Yeah.
I really hope this 90-day extension,
Gets extended again.
Further. Yeah, and they can get over themselves and let's just move on.
Yeah,
but I don't see that happening. I mean, we're in the middle of a new type of kind of digital corporate warfare. Who's bigger? Who's better?
Yeah, and we see Google. I see Google is protesting to the US government, saying that banning Huawei from having access to Android is counter to national security, US national security interests. Obviously, they're arguing their own corner because they don't want a third ecosystem emerging to compete with Android and iOS, which is likely to be the outcome if the US government pushes ahead with these sanctions, if I can call them that. But yeah, I hope Huawei continues to have access to Android too, because I think they've been a real challenger in this market. They've taken the fight to Samsung and to Apple, and I think the market will be significantly poorer if Huawei loses access to Android, even if they come up with a good alternative. I think it's going to weaken them for a couple of years at the very least.
I was just calling up a news story that I remember reading. What was also of interest to all of this is that hasn't the US now signed something with Russia for 5G technology? So they're using a Russian-based, or they're working with Russian-based
Huawei?
MTS. No, the US, isn't it the US?
The only story I saw about this week was...
Sorry, no, you're right. It is Russia and Huawei, my mistake.
Russia and Huawei, yeah. And then Putin was at the press conference, and he slammed the US over its attacks on Huawei in China.
Look, at least in that regard, we know it bodes well for us in terms of, our access and probably ongoing access to the technology.
Yeah.
Although it wouldn't help, in the broader scheme of things in the kind of Google technology. We don't want that third player, or that kind of, we don't want to break off from the Android operating system as users.
Yeah. But we'll keep a close eye on the space. I think that 90-day window expires, when is it? Late August? Mid to late August. So we'll definitely have some news from the US Commerce Department before then on what they're going to be doing. But I think the whole trade war between Trump and China is coming to a head soon as well. There's a key meeting happening this coming week or the week after. So the whole thing's unfolding this year, in these next few weeks.
Wouldn't it be great to see a new launch from Huawei coming up, where they have a grater style PC for half the price? Done.
Running what though?
With a free stand included.
Install your own Windows.
Oh yes, and it runs Windows, dual boot operating system.
Yeah, that's what I've wondered about this. What's to stop? I suppose Android is more difficult. The consumer doesn't want to have to install Android, although I'm sure they could make it easier to do that. But certainly from a Google services perspective, there's no real issue as far as I can see with this Huawei ban by the US government, because Google's agreements in terms of its apps are not between Google and Huawei, they're between Google and you, the end user. So I'm sure there's a way that Huawei could make it easy for end users to install the Play Store, install Google services once, post-purchase. It's not ideal, obviously, but I'm sure they can do that.
Yeah, I mean, they'll just have some, I guess also if they just bring it into the country and then have their local service centers do what needs to be done. I mean, there's a lot of ways around that. But it could be interesting. Imagine buying a blank phone. Huawei phone.
Yeah.
And then do you want to run iOS? Certainly. Just here's the download files. If you want Android, here's the installation files. What's it?
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, it's interesting.
In the hands of an ordinary consumer.
Imagine, I mean, that it could be, and you could run any skin on there you want. Have some local developers, in each country do their own thing. It could be interesting.
We've seen PC shipping without operating systems for quite some time. So why not phones?
And also, I mean, I think in a few years the whole operating system thing is going to kind of be a moot point regardless, because everything will be running, or more things will be running off an internet-based service. So your phone again will only have power requirements for what it needs to display and throw out at you. But the real processing power will likely come from another server.
Apps streamed to you. I mean, the user interface could be streamed to you, I suppose. I'm not sure how practical that is, and I'm not sure it's a world I'm looking forward to if that's where it's going.
Well, software is getting smaller, so you'll be able to fit more onto smaller space. So in terms of storage capacity, I mean, even power, it's not really an issue. But if you want to do something fancy with your phone and include some really cool new technologies that we don't know about, you don't have to then worry about that premium for space for a processor and the heat for a processor running all the time.
Didn't the Firefox OS from Mozilla, the Firefox mobile OS, already kind of do this? It was an HTML-based operating system, HTML5, I think, based operating system, where basically when you looked at your phone, it was a web interface.
Chromebook is like that too, right?
Yeah,
I think so. I can't remember that. But again, a lot of these technologies are kind of too soon for like ahead of their time too.
Yeah.
We are kind of holding out for. I mean, we know the technology would work now, but it's going to be impractical if you're driving somewhere, going somewhere remote, and trying to do some work. So again, in a 5G world where we connected at every inch of the planet, that becomes immediately more feasible, especially at the speed they're predicting.
Yeah.
We can see the trends rolling into the space of, our devices are going to become smaller just because we can offset a lot of that power. Maybe we can make more space for battery power now. So now all of a sudden your device is just 100% battery with a screen attached to it.
That'd be nice. Maybe I'd go for that. So,
sorry, no, go for it.
No, I was just going to move on to our next subject if you want to finish that thought.
No, I was going to be silly and say, we do need to improve the battery technology vastly from where we are still.
Yeah.
It's nowhere near where it should be.
Yeah. It's getting better, though, slowly.
It is.
So Standard Bank announced this week that they're closing down 104 branches around the country, which is a significant number. And it's not the only one doing this. In fact, the only major bank that's growing the number of branches is Capitec. And even they have slowed down their rollout quite considerably. But F&B, Nedbank, and Absa are all slowly cutting back on the number of branches. And there's been a bit of an outcry over this because some small dorps out in places like the Northern Cape, which had a Standard Bank branch before, for example, prior to this announcement, will no longer have one. And some people who live in these towns who happen to be Standard Bank customers might not now have to travel 50 kilometers or more to the next town to be able to go into a branch. It's inevitable, though, isn't it, Regardt? I mean, as we move to digital channels, and the banks have been encouraging us to do this for years, we're going to see more branch closures. And in fact, Standard Bank, most of its branch closures are happening here in Johannesburg and in the greater Gauteng region. So, yeah, I don't mourn. I mean, sure, the job losses are unfortunate and, they come with this cost cutting, but I'd hate going into bank branches, and I won't miss them if they all disappear, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there are way too many of them, and costs within a mall must be pretty expensive, for a bank branch. And some of those branches are pretty big.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of them are just showpieces, right? I mean, they're just trying to kind of show off their best, latest new kind of banking technology.
Yeah.
So there is no need for it. But like you said, with the smaller towns, the problem is the people that need the branches who don't have access to the technology or don't have access to the technology. So those are the guys that need the branches, right? If they could offset that work onto the ATMs, which I know a lot of ATMs with some of the banks have become more advanced, so you can do a lot more with the ATM. You don't need to go into a branch and pull statements or whatever.
Yeah.
So that could also work for those guys but again, they don't have the technology, and sometimes you just have to go into a branch.
Occasionally you still have to go into a branch, yeah. But I'm always amazed when I go to my local shopping mall where four of the banks are clustered together in this banking mall. And you go in there on a Saturday morning and there are queues out the door with people doing physical branch banking. And I just wonder, why are you doing this? You're obviously paying a fortune for the transactions you're doing over the counter. You could do it much cheaper at an ATM or on your phone in the smartphone app. So why queue? I don't understand it.
Maybe the queue is a kind of direct relation to the problems people are facing with the bank, especially if the admin stuff isn't working.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a bit of a kind of a wild guess.
Yeah.
Because you should be able to sort, like you said, do at the ATM or over the phone. But I know I've spoken to people that said, I couldn't do it. I just had to go into the bank to speak to somebody to sort this out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. Actually, now that you mention it, it's only one bank that has the queue out the door, and that's F&B, which is one of the more aggressive ones in terms of digital channels, which just doesn't seem to stack up. I mean, I would expect APSA, for example, to have the long queue coming out the door, but they typically don't. Maybe it's just a function of F&B's growth. Maybe they've got so many customers now that's why they have so many people in their bank branch on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to see also what kind of queries they have. But I think that, the ATM, I've seen a lot of ATMs being upgraded to kind of more functional ATMs. So I think that's kind of going to be the future. But is the customer going to see the savings that these banks have at the end of the day by not having so many staff and branches? Are we going to have cheaper bank fees? No, probably not. Are we going to have, better facilities, less fluff with our accounts and just more good service? Probably not. Yeah. When is Bank Zero launching? That still needs to launch, right?
Bank Zero is coming later this year. Time Bank is launched. They don't have any branches. They're working. They've got those terminals in Pick and Pay stores, Pick and Pay and Boxer stores. And they don't need branches. I mean, they've got these kiosks with some assistance there sometimes to help you open an account and that sort of thing. And they've been doing very well. They've signed up a lot of customers already.
What's the churn like? Are those customers actually spending money on it? That will be the interesting part.
I don't know. Are they second bank accounts? Yeah, who knows? But it's an interesting time. I mean, here's a question for you, Regardt. When was the last time you went into a bank branch, and why did you go into the bank branch?
It's been a while. It's been a while. Okay, I do have access to a private banker, so I just mail somebody if I need something, and they sort it out for me. But no, I didn't. Apart from the closest I get is going to an ATM if I need cash. But even that is rare because you don't need to transact with cash anymore.
I was trying to think. I think the last time I went into a bank branch was a year ago because I was having a problem with paying a large amount of Forex. So I went into the bank branch to try and resolve it, and the branch couldn't resolve it, and I ended up having a conversation with the head office on the telephone, and it was resolved on the telephone. So ultimately, I actually didn't need to go into the branch.
Interesting.
And before that, I think I went into a branch to open a joint checking account with my wife after we got married, which was about 3.5 years ago.
Even that type of thing now you can off a lot of places you can just send a photograph, a copy of your ID, and they can't do it. FNB allows you to just send a selfie or something.
Yes.
What was interesting, I remember the last time I went into a bank account was also probably about a year. Bank was also a year ago, and when I went in, they actually put me into a room that connected me via like a telelink service, teleconference service to a banker sitting in an office cubicle somewhere. It was quite interesting. So I didn't speak to somebody in the branch. Maybe, again, that would be a great service if I can do it from the comfort of my own home. I guess security is always going to be a thing, but if I can log in securely via an app or something, maybe that's this. But again, the technology is limited to those people that can afford a smartphone.
For sure. But it's interesting times, and I think more and more branches are going to close. There'll probably always be a need for a couple of branches, but
especially in the smaller, more rural areas. I mean, we know.
Yeah, but that's where they're closing some of these branches. I mean, certainly most of them are in Gauteng, but they're also closing some of these smaller branches in these smaller towns. Like, I'm not picking on Hope Town in particular, but that name seems to ring a bell in the Standard Bank list.
Will we see rival banks coming up with pop-up bank stores or smaller bank branches and take those customers?
Who knows?
That's going to be interesting.
Yeah. So I think that takes care of our news this week, Regardt. Am I missing anything? No, I think that's it. Apple, Huawei, and the Great Bank Branch Massacre. Sounds like the name of a movie. Let's move on to our regular features. We don't have a winner this week, and our loser is Google, which is now facing a U.S. Department of Justice antitrust investigation It's still at its early stages, but we know these can be very disruptive for companies. And we saw the big DOJ investigation into Microsoft. I think it was back in the late 1990s. And Microsoft kind of lost its way after that. I think it really was a shock to their system. And I'm sure the guys at Google are worried that so a similar investigation and probing by the Department of Justice is going to potentially throw them off track. It's done it before and it could do it again. So there's, in fact, a number of antitrust probes that are being divvied up between the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission in the US. But the DOJ is going after Google. And they're also looking at Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. It's an interesting time, given the US-China trade war, to be for the US to be picking on its own technology leaders. You'd think that this would not be the optimal time to be doing it, but there you go. They're instigating these probes. But Google share price took a massive smack after the DOJ probe was announced. I think it was earlier this week.
So it's not going to make them more friendly towards their own country, right?
Yeah.
More reason to resist.
It seems like strange timing to me. And David Shapiro, the stockbroker, put out a tweet along these lines this week saying these companies are investing so much, I forget the figure, hundreds or tens of billions of dollars every year in research and development. They are plowing money into R&D. Now you're picking a fight with Huawei in China, while at the same time you're going to take on the companies that are investing so much in technology and development. It just seems a bit. The timing seems a bit odd. I thought his tweet was quite incisive. We'll be back next week, hopefully with a winner, but no one jumped out this week. Regardt, you're picking a hard drive this week, are you?
Yeah, well, actually, it's one of these little things. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if it's focusing.
Is that an SSD?
Yeah,
NVMe.
It's the SSD NVMe drive, M.2.
Nice.
This is a 512 gigabyte version, but isn't it incredible how far we've come?
Yeah, I've got one in my PC. Yeah.
Now, for those of you that don't know what this type of hard drive is, it's essentially a hard drive that plugs in directly to a channel on your motherboard. So instead of going through a serial port, this thing just plugs directly into one of the channels, and
so you normally
connect it to performance.
Where would you normally connect an SSD? To the PCI port or somewhere else in the
what PC? No, what do I forget the name of that port now? Serial ATA SATA port.
Oh, SATA. Okay.
Yeah, because it's got that little plug. You just put it in. So if you have an SSD, obviously you can still do hard drives. That's very popular for larger storage. I mean, these things are very expensive. So if you're going to get a terabyte or 4 terabyte, that's why the MacBooks are so expensive, because they use these type of hard drives.
Yeah.
But they are fantastic as your main boot drive. I've actually got an XPG, older one, a 480 gigabyte in my machine. And in terms of power, in terms of performance, it's fantastic.
Is that an NVMe as well?
No, that's it. Yeah, in M.2.
M.2, yeah.
M.2 NVMe.
Yeah, I've got one in my main production PC, and it's unbelievable how quick it is and how fast Windows 10 boots from cold.
Yeah, it is crazy. I don't actually have any moving, apart from the fans, anything else that's moving drive wise. All my drives I've got some external drives for backup, but everything's on the cloud really, and I just keep the most important stuff on that drive. But at 512 gigabytes, it's a nice size for a main boot drive. You can store all your games in there, plus some apps and movies and whatever. So you don't actually need those 4, 5, 6, 10 terabytes unless you have big collections of stuff. I mean, I remember collecting. You used to save your games. Now, if I'm not playing it for a while, I'll uninstall it and install it again at a later point, even if it's just a 60 gig download, because I know there will inevitably be updates to that. Where back in the day, you kind of saved all of your installation files, so you don't need that much storage space. But
your save games will be in the cloud when you reinstall.
Exactly. Yeah. So the only things you really want to save now is photographs, right? Photographs, Word documents, important. Anything else that's digitally that's important to you. But those are generally stored, backed up, not in your main gaming rig.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of performance, very impressed with XPG and what it does. I mean, I can throw numbers at you, but it won't make a difference really. These things are very fast, and copying between 2 drives. So if you've got 2 NVMe drives, copying between them is also incredibly fast. So if you do want to have a second one as a backup. So just under $2,000, you can certainly get a lot more value if you're going for a 4 terabyte drive, for example.
Yeah.
But this is not really aimed at that. This is for performance. So if you do have a SSD or even a older spindle-based drive, pop one of these in. If your motherboard supports it, though, you need to have that. It usually sits between your PCI Express cards.
Yeah.
Just slot one of these in, and you'll see a massive boost in performance.
So what make is that? What brand?
XPG.
XPG. Okay.
So this, here we go.
And the prices have come down quite beautifully as well. They're nowhere near.
Yeah, I mean,
expensive as they
512
used to be.
gigabytes for just under, I think it's 1.9. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
That's my pick.
Cool. My pick this week is I haven't played with it yet, but I was so impressed with the Keynote that I thought I'd pick iPadOS. Really looking forward to it. I will probably be installing the public preview when it's released, the beta. I don't think I will be going for the developer version. Not brave enough for that, but almost certainly I'm really looking forward to this software. And what I've seen in the Keynote is enough for me to recommend it, and look forward to the full final commercial release in September at the iPhone announcement. And what have I done with my show notes? They've disappeared. I know that they are. I think that's it, Regardt. I think that's our show, apart from our quiz results. Do you want to do the first one?
Certainly. Apple this week debuted the new Cheese Grater Mac Pro. What is its starting price? And for a bonus point, how much is one of the new 6K monitors designed to go with the new Mac Pro cost? And the answer there obviously was at whopping $6,000, $5,999, with the monitor fetching $4,999. And that's obviously without an optional $1,000 stand.
Yikes. How many bank branches is Standard Bank closing down, it said this week, and that's 104.
Third question, on what basis is Google seeking an exemption from the US government for dealing with Android? And the answer is, it's argued that the ban is a threat to the US national security.
And Google is making its biggest acquisition since 2014, buying which company for $2.6 billion? And that's a company called Looker Data Sciences.
And the final question, Samsung has revealed it will use which company's graphics chips in its future smartphones? And the answer is AMD.
And that's our show. We got off to a little bit of a rocky start on Wirecast. And I think at one point, Regardt, I forgot to add you back when you disappeared for a bit. I think I forgot to add you back into the live stream. So there may be a minute or two at some point in this podcast, if you're watching it after the fact, where I'm just talking to myself. I think it's at the start of our Apple discussion. But it's settling down. I like the software. We're going to be doing lots of stuff with this. So if you do listen to the audio version of this podcast, do join us on YouTube at some point. Search TalkCentral, one word, hit that subscribe button, and join us on YouTube, and join us in the chat room. And maybe we'll be brave enough to put this all out over social media next week. I think there's nothing like doing it live, Regardt, to learn quickly, hey?
Yes, especially when the link goes down halfway through and you don't know what to do.
What happened, yes.
we can't just pause and say, okay, let's just restart that segment.
Yes.
But I think it's a fantastic way of doing it, because the reality is the real part of it. And I think I certainly enjoy seeing that in other kind of YouTube series that I watch, or YouTube creators programs that I watch.
Yeah. Warts and all.
What awards and all? Thank you.
Maybe a bit later. Let's get the bugs out of the system first. But I must say I'm very impressed with Wirecast, and looking forward to doing very, very cool stuff with this down the line. So come along, join Regardt and me for the ride, and let us know your thoughts. I now think I need to go into the YouTube backend and hit this big red button that says stop streaming. But before I do that, until next time, from Regardt and myself, cheers.
Ciao, ciao.